Okay, so this video is basically a response to comments made by Ginger Baker in the documentary Beware of Mr. Baker, and also comments made in the same documentary by Eric Clapton regarding John Bonham's proficiency as a drummer. And in this documentary, both Ginger Baker and Eric Clapton suggest that Bonham was little more than a basher, that he didn't really have much of a feel for the drums or a tonal capacity, and I wanted to talk about those suggestions a little bit in depth here. And so before I do that, here is exactly what Ginger Baker said.
The general public are so fucking dumb. Anybody could think that Bonham was anywhere near this kind of drummer I am. It's just extraordinary. Bonham had technique, but he couldn't swing a fucking sack of shit.
And then here is exactly what Eric Clapton said.
When they think of Ginger, they think of Keith Moon and Bonham.
No. Ginger was nothing like those players. His musical capabilities are full spectrum. He can write and compose and arrange, and he has an ear, and he is harmonic. He's a fully formed musician.
And if you care to research it on your own, you can also find Keith Richards saying something very similar about John Bonham, in that he was the lead element of Led Zeppelin, which prevented the band from actually taking off. And while it's true that Bonham has really heavy hands, this is almost precisely the thing that gives him his signature sound, and it's a defining element of Led Zeppelin. And Led Zeppelin as a three-piece required a really heavy drummer to sustain them, because they didn't have that extra rhythm guitar in their live performances. So that's one of the first points to consider. The next one is what Ginger Baker actually said is that John Bonham doesn't have a sense of swing. So let's talk about individual tracks. Let's start off with the famous song Rock and Roll. Here's a little bit of that. So the famous part, the intro, which is notoriously difficult, technically demanding for just about any drummer to play, is nothing but a swing, so far as I can tell. And I think that if this were an isolated case, Baker might still have a point. But if you listen to something like Fool in the Rain, and here's a little bit of that. This is an extremely swingy pattern that inspired no less than Jeff Porcaro to come up with the Rosanna halftime shuffle. And I don't think that Ginger Baker has anything in his resume to compare with that, much of an iconic just drum beat. So let's take a little bit of a listen to Ginger Baker's drumming in his signature solo Toad. Now what you hear there is a sound that's very similar to Bonham. It's very heavy, it's very busy, it's based on triplets, and it has a lot of bottom end to it. In fact, if I were to play bits of Toad and bits of Bonham's live drum solos without telling you which one was which, you might not be able to tell the difference between the two. So let's move on to Clapton's suggestion that Ginger Baker had a better sense of tonality than John Bonham. Well, track after track from Led Zeppelin shows that that's not exactly an accurate statement. If you go back and listen to something like the Rain song, he's playing with everything from brushes to mallets in the same exact song, and not only that, he's making full use of all the cymbals and all the drums in a tonally sophisticated manner. Unlike anything I've ever heard from Ginger Baker, perhaps Ginger Baker's simple tonality shifts in White Room are the basis for making this accusation, but they don't hold water. So just in that brief little survey of Bonham's drumming, you can see that the things that they accused him of in the documentary don't add up. They're not valid. Therefore, Ginger Baker's suggestion that John Bonham couldn't swing a sack of shit isn't not true, and it's also not true that people in general, the public, are wrong about comparing the two of them. In fact, Bonham is a better drummer than Ginger Baker, and Led Zeppelin is a better band than Cream. Now, it may be down to subjective taste in some ways, but the lasting impact that John Bonham has had on drumming and the signature drums that he's put on so many Led Zeppelin tracks far outweighs anything that Ginger Baker accomplished in his numerous bands. Alright, that's my thoughts on this, and I appreciate your listening and supporting the channel. Thanks a lot.